When the United States announced the introduction of tariffs on imported goods, it naturally drew the attention of many countries around the world. After all, such a move can significantly affect global trade dynamics and has the potential to disrupt markets and economies worldwide. Countries like Europe and China, being major players in international trade, were particularly interested in how these tariffs would impact them and what kind of response would be most effective. The European Union, one of the world's largest trading blocs, expressed its deep concerns over the US tariffs, stating that they violated global trade rules and could trigger a trade war. The EU's top official, Ursula von der Leyen, strongly criticized the US decision, highlighting that such unilateral actions could destabilize the entire global economy. She pledged that the EU would take necessary measures to protect European industries and jobs. The United States has a history of taking unilateral action regarding trade policies and often puts the interest of its own country first, regardless of the impact it might have on others. This time, the US government argued that the tariffs were a measure to protect American industries and jobs from unfair competition. But many other countries saw this as a self-destructive move. They believed that the tariffs would not only hurt the American industries in the long run but also disrupt the smooth flow of global trade. Europe found itself in a peculiar situation. On one hand, it wanted to maintain a strong alliance with the United States. On the other hand, it had to protect the interest of its member states, especially when they were directly affected. For example, Germany, being a major car manufacturer, was concerned about the potential impact of the tariffs on its auto industry. France, too, had its own set of worries about how the tariffs would affect its trade balance. Despite these concerns, Europe initially adopted a tough stance. It condemned the tariffs and threatened retaliatory measures if the US did not reconsider its decision. It seemed that Europe was prepared to defend its position firmly, not backing down despite the potential consequences. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when Europe softened its position rather abruptly. Just weeks after criticizing the tariffs, the European Commission, the executive branch of the European Union, started to show a willingness to negotiate. Ursula von der Leyen, the leader of the Commission, even went as far as to suggest that the EU was open to eliminating tariffs on industrial goods. This proposal was part of a larger plan that involved concluding trade talks with the US and 6 other countries. This shift in Europe's approach left many wondering about its true intentions. Was it truly open to finding a solution through dialogue, or was it just a strategic move to buy time? Meanwhile, another major player, China, entered the scene. The US government approached China with a request to reduce its tariffs, hoping that this would help strike a deal and resolve the issue. However, China rejected the US request outright. It showed no willingness to reduce its tariffs, signaling that it would not be pressured into making concessions. Instead, China decided to retaliate by introducing additional tariffs of its own and imposing restrictions on exports. Notably, it targeted materials that are crucial for manufacturing technology products. This move demonstrated China's determination to protect its own industries and not be dictated to by the United States. It showed that China was ready to stand up for its own interests and was not afraid of escalating the conflict further. In response, the US government issued a warning, suggesting that it was prepared to impose even more tariffs if the trade discussions failed to produce an agreement. This statement increased the tension, signaling that the US was willing to go to great lengths to achieve its goals. It showed that the US was not hesitant to escalate the situation, which could have a ripple effect on global trade. As the standoff continued, the impact on global trade became more apparent. Countries that relied on trade with the US and China started to feel the squeeze. Some countries had to make tough choices about where to redirect their exports, while others had to deal with the loss of important markets. For example, the European Union, being one of the world's largest exporters of cars, was hit hard by the tariffs imposed by both the US and China. This meant that European car manufacturers had to find new markets for their products, which was not always easy. Similarly, countries that depended on selling raw materials to China, such as Australia and Brazil, had to find alternative buyers when China imposed export restrictions. This created a ripple effect that disrupted trade patterns worldwide. The ongoing trade tensions also led to uncertainty in the global economy. Investors became cautious and hesitant to invest in countries or industries that were caught in the crossfire. This lack of clarity made it difficult for businesses to plan for the future, leading to a slowdown in economic activity. Additionally, the tariffs imposed by the US and China increased the cost of goods for consumers. This meant that everyday items became more expensive, which affected people's purchasing power and overall standard of living. Consumers had to adjust their spending habits, which in turn impacted businesses and the economy. Canada, a key player in the energy market, noticed these shifts and felt the pressure. As an important oil supplier to the United States, Canada observed the escalating trade tensions with concern. It realized that the situation could significantly affect its energy exports to the US market. The potential disruption in trade flows due to the tariffs prompted Canada to consider adjusting its energy export strategies. Officials and industry leaders began to explore options to diversify their export markets and reduce reliance on the potentially volatile US market. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith raised the possibility of redirecting oil exports to Europe as an alternative to the United States. She noted that Europe was already facing energy challenges due to the conflict in Ukraine and could benefit from a reliable energy source like Canadian oil. Proposing this idea, Premier Smith stated, "If the United States wants to tax Canadian energy, then we're going to have to look elsewhere." She emphasized that Canada has obligations to its oil and gas producers to ensure they have access to international markets for their product. This suggests that if the US continues to impose tariffs on Canadian energy exports, Canada may choose to prioritize European markets. By doing so, Canada could not only secure a more stable market for its energy, but also contribute to meeting Europe's energy needs during a time of crisis. However, shifting energy exports to Europe is not a simple decision. It involves complex logistical considerations, infrastructure requirements, and contractual obligations that Canada must carefully evaluate. Moreover, such a decision would have broader implications for Canada's foreign policy and its relationship with other trading partners, particularly in the context of an increasingly polarized world. Despite the challenges, Premier Smith's proposal reflects Canada's proactive approach to navigating the evolving global trade dynamics. Canada is recognizing the need to secure alternative markets for its energy exports in light of the uncertainties created by the escalating trade tensions between the US and China. Furthermore, Canada's decision to consider diversifying its energy export markets goes beyond just responding to external factors. It also reflects Canada's own domestic priorities. Securing reliable markets for its energy products is crucial for the Canadian economy. The country has vast energy resources and a strong track record of safe and environmentally responsible production. But to fully realize the benefits of this resource, Canada needs to ensure that it can export its energy to markets that value reliability, sustainability, and high-quality products. Europe, with its growing demand for clean energy sources, presents a viable alternative market for Canadian energy producers. By establishing strong energy partnerships with European countries, Canada can not only contribute to meeting Europe's energy needs, but also secure stable markets for its energy exports. On the other hand, the United States, the world's largest economy, has felt the effects of the tariffs in different ways. One of the most immediate impacts has been on the automotive industry. Automakers like Ford and General Motors have faced higher import costs due to the tariffs imposed on steel and aluminum. These increased costs have directly affected the bottom line of these companies, making it more expensive to manufacture vehicles in the United States. As a result, some automakers have had to adjust their production plans or pass on the additional costs to consumers in the form of higher prices. Another sector that has been hit hard by the trade war is technology. Companies like Apple and Microsoft rely on a global supply chain to manufacture and distribute their products. The tariffs imposed by both the US and China have disrupted the supply chain, leading to delays and increased costs. For example, tariffs on components like semiconductors have made it more expensive to produce electronic devices. This has not only squeezed profit margins, but also forced tech companies to reconsider their sourcing and manufacturing strategies. Meanwhile, farmers in America's heartland have been grappling with the consequences of the trade war. The agricultural sector has been severely affected by the retaliatory tariffs imposed by trading partners. For instance, China, which was once a major market for American soybeans and pork, has significantly reduced its purchases due to the tariffs. This has resulted in lower export volumes and reduced income for farmers. Many farmers have had to scale back their operations or store their products, hoping for a resolution to the trade dispute. The overall effects of the tariffs on the United States have been significant. Not only have businesses faced increased costs and reduced export markets, but consumers have also had to deal with higher prices for everyday items. The trade war has created a climate of uncertainty and economic stress, impacting various sectors across the country. As the trade dispute between the US and China continues, the impact on the American economy is likely to persist, affecting businesses, farmers, and consumers alike. To sum it up, the global reaction to the US tariffs has been a mix of criticism, condemnation, and strategic responses. Each country had to navigate this complex situation based on its own interests and priorities. While the US government may view its actions as necessary steps to protect its national interest, the broader implications and unintended consequences continue to raise questions about the future of global trade. The story of Canada serves as a reminder of how interconnected our world is. A single decision can send ripples across continents, affecting not just economies, but also energy markets and the everyday lives of consumers.